Well, hello. If you don't know me, my name is Tyler Winn, and I am set to be the new minister at Osage Hills Christian Church beginning in January. But in the meantime, I've been asked to send videos from afar, from the faraway land of Georgia, and give you a few thoughts about Christmas. And one of the things you need to know about me is that when I read the Bible, I do occasionally find in it a sense of humor. Because I think the Bible was written through the inspiration of God through human beings, and I think there's a lot of fascinating and interesting pieces. So, for instance, there's a story in the book of Judges about a man named Gideon. And when we first are introduced to Gideon, he's actually hiding. You see, he's threshing wheat in a wine press, which is not how you do things. The Midianites, who are the enemies at the time, have been overrunning the area and stealing the wheat from the Jews. And so Gideon is doing what any smart, I suppose, or scared person would do, which is hiding in the wine press to thresh his wheat to make sure they don't steal it from him. And in the midst of this rather bizarre situation, an angel suddenly appears out of nowhere and looks at Gideon and says, "The Lord be with you, mighty warrior." I have always found that to be a moment to chuckle because I can just picture Gideon looking around him going, "Who are you talking to?" And yet God calls Gideon to become the new leader and warrior and judge to drive out the Midianites, and he does so with only 300 men. It's a really beautiful and fascinating story. But you may be asking me, well, what does this have to do with Christmas at all? Well, I think there is something there, because if you go forward to the 1st century AD, and you find a very similar moment in which an angel appears out of nowhere to a scared, maybe 15-year-old girl and says, "Blessed are you who is favored by God." Of course, this young woman is Mary, the mother of Jesus. And he absolutely, in a singular moment, blows away all of her expectations for life. Tells her that a certain kind of trouble is coming her way, that she is going to give birth. And not only that, but she is going to be the mother of the child of God himself. Now, I don't know about you, but I think I'd be looking behind myself going, "And who are you talking to?" But you see, God has this fabulous way of constantly using the people who are least expected and turning them into his people. In fact, he likes to use the people who feel powerless. See, Gideon objected that his family was unimportant and he came from the least important tribe. Moses said, "Well, I can't speak well." And Mary, for all of her troubles, said, "I am the Lord's servant, use me as you will." For once, someone powerless had the courage to speak up and say, "Okay, God, use me as you will." I personally have always, or I guess I've never taken for granted the idea that I would get to preach the gospel of Jesus. I know I went through all the school, but it is not something that I should ever be allowed to do, at least not in my human sense. There are times in my life in which I have felt powerless, in which I have not known what to do, when I have looked at all the trouble in the world and thought, what in the world can I do to change anything? But the amazing thing about Christmas is that God used the least of these and the least powerful, because when he does, God's power is more exemplified. He uses a young teenage girl. He uses some shepherds in a field. He uses some fishermen to become his closest followers. And he uses all of that to change the entire world. From the moment hope is born in Jesus to the moment that the gospel is taken to the ends of the earth, and ultimately the moment we hope for when Jesus comes back. God has always used the least of these because it glorifies him more. I remember when I was in Bible college, a lot of my peers were doing a lot of their ministry practice as youth ministers. And that was such an important ministry, and they took kids all over the place and formed relationships with them. But I knew pretty early on that youth ministry was not going to be my calling. So instead, I ended up actually volunteering at a nursing home, a large facility near my house in Atlanta. And I spent every weekend with some people who I found were very lonely. Some were very sick. And having conversations with them were some of the easiest conversations I've ever had in my life. And helping out with their Sunday services and getting to know them was kind of my first experience ministering to people that I would say were on the margins. And I think that ministry on the margins is incredibly important. So, for instance, in the Bible story, one of the most famous sections of Scripture is the one in which the angels appear to the shepherds out in the fields at night. And one of the remarkable things about that section is how these shepherds were such common people, such ordinary people. They weren't the important ones. They weren't the teachers of the law. They weren't the priests. They weren't even the Levites. They were the people that would often be forgotten. And when Mary and Joseph show up, they don't have a place to put the child, and so they put him in a manger, literally a feeding trough. It's a moment of strange quietness until all of a sudden these angels break out speaking to the most ordinary of men to tell them the good news of the story. I find that incredibly powerful. Because even though you and I may not be the most important people in the world, we are the ordinary folks. And God trusts us with the task of taking his message to the world. If you read that section of the shepherds, they immediately go out and begin to tell others about what they saw. Meaning that those ordinary people were really the first Christian evangelists. They were the first ones to say, hey, have you heard about this child being born? They were the first ones entrusted with the Christmas message. You see, most of our evangelism the best evangelism, I should say, is in the small things. It's in the day-to-day conversations. It's at the grocery store, and it's at the baseball team that our child plays on. It's when we go about our life and take our heads out of our phones and tell people, guess what? Christ was born for you. We often think that the best Christmas and the best evangelism will come with big and flashy services, but the truth is, the best celebrations happen in homes. They happen when we simply get together with our children and read the story and remind them of why Christmas matters. It happens with ordinary people like you and me. It happens in the margins. You see, God entrusts people like us to share that story. We live in the tradition of those shepherds, and we tell others about the baby being born. So I have a 6-year-old son named Macon, and he is so funny in so many ways, but one of the things that he has reminded me of is just how hard it is when you're a child to wait. I mean, it's hard enough to wait for Christmas, but even in the ordinary things, like we go out to a restaurant that's not fast food, and we're sitting at the table talking, and Macon just breaks out and says, "How long does it take to make a cheeseburger?" And I think to myself, wait a minute, son, wait till I even tell you about TV commercials, the things he doesn't know and experience. But I also realize that waiting really isn't easy for anyone. Waiting is just inherently difficult, and it seems to get more difficult every year as our phones give us access to absolutely everything. But I do think that there's a possibility that you get a little bit more patient with age. There's a story around Christmas of a woman named Anna who lived only a few years with her husband and then became a widow for a very, very long time. 84 years, I believe. And she spent all of her life praying and praying in the temple, or in the courts, I should say, and asking God for help and guidance. She was incredibly faithful through that entire thing. And her story is coupled with another man by the name of Simeon, who himself was waiting. He'd been told by God that he would not die until he had met the Messiah, or as it says, he was waiting for the consolation of Israel, the consoling. And both of these people, we presume to be older in age, and they're waiting. And the funny part of the story is that as Christmas happens, they have to bring Jesus to the temple to do the proper rites when he's 8 years old. And both of these people, Anna and Simeon, meet the baby Jesus. And in their spirits, they know that something incredible has happened. God has revealed to them that their years of waiting are now happening. And I think that's really incredible, because the longest I think I've ever waited for something in my life was probably waiting for a sports team to win a championship. But these people waited all their lives to see God act in a powerful way. And when it did, God wanted them to know that their faithful waiting mattered. And I don't know what it is you're waiting for in life. I don't know if you're waiting for God to act, or you're waiting for him to tell you what to do, or you're waiting to get through some hurdle in your life. But waiting can be so hard. And many of us during that season can get completely lost. We can even lose hope. And the Bible reminds us that that can happen. But it also reminds us that it is worthwhile to be patient when waiting on God to act. Because God has his own timing, and God's timing is perfect. And if you look at the way and the time in which Jesus was born, it becomes the perfect opportunity for God to spread his message throughout the entire world. When you think about the infrastructure of the Roman Empire and the roads and the ability for all people to work together under that culture, the Greco-Roman culture and the Latin language and all of that, scholars say it was kind of the perfect time in history to take this one message to the ends of the world. And they did. Because God's timing was perfect. So if you're feeling like Anna or Simeon and you're just waiting on God to act, I encourage you to be faithful. Don't give up. Hang in there. Because God's plan and his message is just so perfect. And I know waiting is hard. I've seen it in my son. I have seen it in me. But I know God is faithful. And I pray that with his help, I'll be faithful too. I remember one time that I was talking to my grandma about Christmas, and we brought up the 3 wise men. And I remember when I told her about what they were, she was really surprised. You see, I think that we've done a disservice to people all of these years by calling them wise men or kings. Actually, the better translation is to call them the Magi, which comes from a word that is at its base magician. You see, the Magi were probably essentially astrologers, people from Babylon in the years, many years ago, who themselves were not believers, but who looked to the stars to help them predict the future. They were soothsayers, they were diviners, they helped the king know what the gods wanted them to do. Which always raises a really weird question. Why in the world did God bother to change the celestial stars to announce Christmas to a few outsiders. That never made a lot of sense to me, and yet I realized that there's something special. The fact that God was able to reorient the stars themselves to declare a message of the birth of the Messiah means that the Christmas message goes out to all people. Whether you are an insider or an outsider, whether you are a believer or not, the Christmas message is for you. And the funny thing about Christmas Eve services and Easter and things like that is that there may be some people watching today who didn't exactly choose to be here. Maybe your family kind of coerced you into it. Maybe you do it out of a tradition. Maybe you feel like an outsider in the building tonight. Well, I want you to know that we recognize that the Christmas message was first announced or early announced to outsiders. And it's our duty and our job to pass that message along. The Christmas message came not only to me and my family and Osage Hills Christian Church, it came to every person in our community. Because the Christmas message is one of hope. It's one of an enduring, persistent declaration of goodwill. Jesus came into this world for everyone. And that's the hope of Christmas. So if you're here today and you are not sure where you stand, please know that Christmas is for you. And if you are here and know where you stand, then please take this message of Christmas to everyone. Because Jesus is not ours to keep. His message is ours to give away. Thank you so much, and Merry Christmas.